Hey, how's it going, Cap City Baptist Church? It's Scott with your Daily Devo. And before we dive into the devotion this morning, I wanted to let you know about some exciting plans that I have for the future. As you guys know, a couple of weeks ago, I went paddleboarding for the first time. Almost broke my ankle in the process, but despite almost breaking my ankle, I have been completely hooked, and I actually, in the next coming weeks, I plan on buying a new paddleboard and getting into the sport. And I'm actually planning on taking a trip with my paddleboard. I'm going to load it with all the gear that I can load onto it. I'm going to paddle out across. I'm just going to go down the American River in my paddleboard. I'll have my fishing pole. I'll just fish right off of my board to catch my dinner and camp along the shore as I paddle along the river. I am super stoked, and if you want to find out what my paddleboard adventure has to do with Jonah, then stay tuned to the end of the video. Well, here we are back at it again in the book of Jonah, picking up right where we left off in chapter 4. I hope you had a chance to read the chapter. If not, you can go ahead and go back and read it. It's only like 2 paragraphs long. It's not that bad. I know that I've said this multiple times in the last few videos, and it feels like I keep beating a dead horse. But if you are just joining us for this video series that we've been doing, it is so important to understand the book of Jonah by understanding the cultural situation at the time. And so, as we have talked about Israel and Assyria, which Nineveh is in Assyria, they are geopolitical competitors. They are adversaries, they are rivals, and for the last few hundred years, the Assyrians have been on top of their game, flexing on Israel, levying tributes and taxes on them. But like we talked about last week, due to some civil unrest and some revolts in Assyria and some attempted power grabs, it is in a period of decline. And through Jeroboam II, who is the king in Israel, he has led the northern kingdom to a time of strength and economic growth. However, Jeroboam is described in the Bible as an evil king. The Bible even describes his reign in 2 Kings 14:26 through 27. It says how the people, both slaves and free, suffered bitterly under his rule. Those who were in power, they could write laws that benefited them and the wealthy at the expense and exploitation of the poor and the common man and the powerless. Life is good for the ruling class and the nobles and the lawmakers. The wealthy, they're powerful. They are living their best lives now. But the common man, both free and slave, like I said, they were not having such a great time. But look back at 2 Kings 14:27, and it says that God says that for his covenant's sake, he would not destroy Israel because of the promise that he made in his covenant, that he wouldn't blot out Israel. And then I can imagine that he looks over at Assyria and sees their wickedness also, but he extends the same grace to them through the reluctant and stubborn prophet Jonah. And after years of prophesying in Israel to deaf ears and hard hearts, Jonah goes to Nineveh, like I said, very, very reluctantly, and experiences his most successful moment in ministry ever. The Assyrians, they immediately repent and offer sacrifices to God, and God relents from the destruction that he promised that he would send. But to Jonah, this seemed very wrong, and he became angry at God. Have you ever found yourself questioning the justice of God like Jonah? Oftentimes I often wonder what it would look like if Hitler had not taken his life in that bunker. If he had been paraded around in the Nuremberg trials, that he would be charged with crimes, convicted of those crimes, and held accountable for those crimes in a court, with the world watching. Of course, we will never see that, and it almost seems like he escaped justice, right? Like he died on his own terms. He got away with it almost, right? But we know as Christians that nobody escapes justice. Even if you live to a ripe old age, committing crimes and sinning against people and thumbing your nose at God, there's going to come a day where you stand before a holy and just God, and that's not going to be a happy day for you if that is your life. And when we see the vilest and most loathsome people living a long life of corruption and exploitation and violence and wickedness, and they die of natural causes at a ripe old age, surrounded by their wealth and their treasures, it's hard for us sometimes to not question God. God asked him, "Is it right for you to be angry?" Jonah doesn't respond. He instead goes off and throws a little pity party for himself. He finds a nice view of the city to see if God would not change his mind and destroy the city anyway. God shows compassion to Jonah even as he's throwing his little temper tantrum by providing a plant to give Jonah shade from the scorching heat. The next day, God takes the plant away, and Jonah once again becomes angry to the point of wanting to die. I find it fascinating that Jonah would rather die than see salvation come to his enemies, but Jesus would rather die to bring salvation to his enemies. God asks him a variation on the question that he asked earlier. He asked, "Is it right for you to be angry about the plant?" To this, Jonah actually does respond. He, like a 3-year-old who had just had his favorite toy taken away. He pouts and he's like, "Yeah, it is." God asks him another question. He says, "Should I not have concern over the 120,000 people in the city of Nineveh, plus the animals?" See, the true injustice here is that Jonah is more concerned for a plant that is here one day and gone the next than he was for 120,000 souls who are blinded by their sin. I love that God ends this book with a question just hanging in the air. We do not know if Jonah learned from the lesson that God was teaching him. This is a question that is left for us to answer in our own lives. Are we so caught up in our own rivalries and our biases that we lose concern for people who are lost to sin in a world of darkness? Do we salivate for the destruction of those we call our enemies? Even as I was preparing my thoughts for this devotion, I heard about a person who I knew to be a toxic leader who recently fell from grace and was exposed in a scandal, and he did not fall well at all. It was a circus, and his hypocrisy and toxicity was on display for all to see. And instead of being heartbroken for him being a slave to sin and being heartbroken for the people that he hurt and took advantage of, and instead of hoping that he would find deliverance and restoration, God help me, I actually reveled in his fall. I was immediately convicted and I repented, and in that moment I felt like Jonah, craving for, salivating for the fall of Nineveh. That just goes to show you how easy it is for us to develop an attitude that is not Christ-like towards our neighbors, even the ones we don't like. Over the last decade or so, with the proliferation of social media, I've noticed a bit of a temperature change within our American culture. I don't know if you've smelled this yourself, but it's a change that I have noticed creeping in to our culture and creeping into our evangelical culture too. This is a change that I've noticed as an increase in what is called tribalism. You might have heard this word. It's kind of become a buzzword in recent years, and what it essentially means is that you have a loyalty to your own social group, the people who look like you, act like you, think like you, believe like you, and vote the same way that you do. And the way that social media is designed in its algorithms, it analyzes the content that you consume. And it gives you suggestions of what others who have viewed that content have also watched, and they suggest that for you to watch. And what this does is it slowly and incrementally gravitates you towards the most extreme expression of whatever that information that is being consumed. And it tends to have a radicalizing effect. For example, like I said in the beginning of this video, I almost broke my ankle paddleboarding a couple of weeks ago. It was the first time, and I genuinely was hooked. I went home and I started watching YouTube videos on paddleboarding. I wanted to learn how to do it. And I just wanted to learn techniques, and I'm like, oh, okay, so that's how you hold your paddle, and maybe it's better to actually paddle instead of slapping the water with your paddle, right? And then after watching some technique videos, I also noticed some other videos popping up. And from those technique videos, I saw other videos like what kind of paddle boards, the different kind of paddle boards you can get. You can get a touring one, you can get a cool racing one. There are fishing paddle boards, there are yoga paddle boards. There are all kinds of different paddle boards in different shapes and sizes that you can get. And I was learning about all of those different products that I could get, and different safety techniques and safety features and safety equipment that I need. And then I saw some other videos popping up. Videos like people going out, taking their paddleboard in the middle of the lake and actually fishing off of them. And I thought that was really cool. And then I saw a video of this guy who likes to take his paddleboard on these solo adventures. And one video, he was actually going down a river that was just covered in tree branches, and there were some fast parts of the river too. And I thought that was really cool. And he also explored the Florida Keys, just paddleboarding from island to island, camping on the little beach there. I was like, man, that is so cool. I could totally see myself doing something like that. And before you know it, I get all amped up and excited to do one of these crazy epic paddleboarding adventures, as silly as that sounds. A couple of problems. I don't really know how to paddleboard. I mean, I've seen a couple of videos and I've seen a couple of techniques. I haven't put them into practice. I haven't mastered those techniques. I haven't even tried those techniques yet, really. And also, don't judge me, I don't even know how to fish. So, and I'm not that great at camping either. So, but nonetheless, I got all excited about going on one of these adventures. Very, very dangerous adventures if you don't know what you're doing, but these videos make it look so easy. It didn't matter to me if I didn't really know how to paddleboard or do all those things. I was just amped up to go. So what does paddleboarding have to do with Jonah? Well, through my research and viewing habits on YouTube, it's led me to a false sense of competency. It led me to this false sense of security in my own abilities, which I have no ability. And I was in over my head. And so often in our world, in our culture, especially online, we can find ourselves in over our head as we descend into our tribes and our echo chambers, and we disseminate information, not even realizing or knowing or even caring sometimes if it's true information. But it supports our biases, so we're going to put it out there. That I've noticed that especially on social media, there is an uptick in name calling, in bullying, and slandering, and between people of all walks of life and persuasions. Memes and articles are the ammunition of the day, and they become weaponized propaganda, full of half-truths or just outright lies. And the conspiracy theories, they queue up or line up one right after the other, and it's getting out of control how many people who are really intelligent people fall for these conspiracies. It's even bled into my life. Just the other day, I took a swipe at a friend online because he posted something I disagreed with. I had to go to him and apologize later. We are 2 months away from an incredibly consequential and emotionally charged election. We are all on edge, and we are all tightly wound. We as Christians are going to be tempted to argue, to backbite, and to slander, and to name call. And when we fall for that temptation, Satan gets exactly what he wants: to put on display to a lost and dying generation the people of God devouring one another. Jonah could not see past his own tribalism to be bothered with showing any compassion for his enemies. But I'm grateful that while we were still Jesus' enemies, he humbled himself, came to earth in the form of a man to show us a better way, to point us to God, to point us to the Father, and ultimately to die for us so that we could be included into his tribe. Well, those are just a few thoughts that I had. I hope that you were blessed by today's Devo. Have a wonderful week, church family. God bless.